Call to order the Budget Personnel Committee meeting February 8, 2022, 5 p.m. And we'll start with public comment, which I don't believe we have any.
No, sir.
And I'll entertain a motion to accept the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And now we'll move on to review of salaries and benefits. And Mike, I will turn this over to you to start that out.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we always do, reviewed the existing salaries and benefits. The highlights of this year, we assume, as we do most years, a 2.5% general increase or average increase for all part-time, full-time, and part-time workers this year. And I've notified the department heads that they're going to have to evaluate their part-time workers on a merit basis like we do our full-time workers. We do not yet have any information from VRS as to what their rates will be this year. They adjust them every 2 years. If you remember, 2 years ago we got an unexpected increase once the budget was quite far along of 2.37%. So we should receive word from VRS this month on what their increase, if any, will be for the next 2 years. I'm hoping where VRS has been so well managed, and notably well managed in this last few years, that we will have little or no increase, but we still don't know what that is. Right now, this budget does not assume an increase for VRS. We also, the other unknown is healthcare. Last year, we made that very good with healthcare. I did assume a 5% increase in this year's budget for healthcare. Anything, if it's 5% or less, we're in good shape. Anything more than that, we'll have to make some adjustments, but if it's less than that, we certainly are in good shape and we can go back and reevaluate this at somewhat lower rates. Those are the highlights. I have given you a chart here that lists the total salaries per department, and I did it salaries and benefits broken out separately and then together for the last 2 years. So you can get a comparison of where we were last year and where we are this year. A couple of highlights. And I have to go to my other chart. I'm sorry. My interactive chart here. Okay, a couple of highlights here. EMS has increased due to the supervisor, which we added back in the fall. And report from Mr. Rush that they're in pretty good shape right now. He's actually, for the year, behind his budget in payroll, which most of EMS budget is payroll, but they're actually well under at this point for payroll for various reasons, but that's good news. Going down to the police department, if you remember, we did increase the pay for 4 officers earlier this year. That is incorporated in this budget as well. And there is a position that was taken out, or not taken out of last year's budget, but pushed aside because of COVID for the investigator. We did not hire that position last year. It is in this position this year, as is the SRO, which you all know that we have up at the high school, and a backfill position for the line officer that we took off duty, who is now the SRO. So that's a total of 12 officers in this budget. Chief Robbie's going to speak to that in a few minutes here about his plans for this budget. We had a number entered in correctly for dispatch, so the number that you see here in FY23 is correct, and we have corrected the FY22 number. If anybody looked at that from last year's information, that would have been a little off. And trolley increased significantly. Of course, vast majority of that, almost 70%, a little over 70% of that is a grant, but we did bump that up considerably, trying to attract some drivers. Right now we only have 2 drivers, we need about 7 for this summer, so we're going to beat the bushes a little bit to see if we can't get some people to come in and drive. It's always a temporary position, and as I said, most of it's paid for with a grant, so we feel fine about that. And the budget personnel, last time this committee looked at trolley last time and okayed that, so we have already submitted the application for grant for trolley. We did that last week. Other than that, I have another was a request for some more information, so we did another chart for you, and this time we just summarized salaries and benefits into one number for each department, and went back all the way to 2018, so you can see how the budget for each department has grown in the last 5 or 6 years, all the way up to what's proposed. The column on the right here is the proposed budget for FY23, and the 5 columns before that, those numbers come from the budget that was approved, not actual expenditures, but the budget that was approved for those departments back then. So, other than that, I'll entertain any questions. If you have specific questions about specific personnel, we can address that in our closed session a little later on.
The school resource officer, isn't that grant-based now, grant-funded?
Yes, I believe it's 70% of it is.
Yes, about that.
Grant
Yeah,
funded.
around 2/3 or so.
And how long is that for?
2 years.
So this is the last year coming
Well,
up, 26?
it's yearly, but we can apply up to 4 years.
Up to
right.
4?
No, not guaranteed,
Right.
but we have to apply. Tyler's in the process now of
Yeah.
applying for next year's grant.
And we certainly will apply that for that all 4 years, but at the end of that 4 years, my understanding is that money goes away, so we'll have to make a decision on whether to incorporate that
Maintain that.
position or let it go. Now, there is a bill before the legislature that will require all school divisions to supply fund at least one resource officer for every high and middle school, which of course, if that happens, Accomack County Schools would be responsible for supplying a resource officer to this school, and it does say from the local police department, so we're hoping it would be from, we'll fight for it to be from CPD and keep that position on. We're hoping that bill goes through.
Right, that was when I told Mike about that bill, because that was an interesting bill, because apparently what's happening across the state is similar to what's happening to us, in that the county is saying, we're not giving you a school resource officer because you don't have a high crime rate and all that jazz. So it's the same thing that's happening across the state, and the local PDs are having to foot the bill. So this guy's trying to, he's out of Virginia Beach, he's trying to make it where they have to, if they're going to provide it in one school, they got to provide it in all schools. It's the way it should be.
Right.
So, I mean, that's encouraging.
Some schools in the county have two, right?
There were, when I left, there were 3 resource officers. One covered each high school. One covered each of the mainland high schools, and the other officer covered, they shared one with the middle schools. That's when they got the 3rd officer, so they could start sharing one with the middle schools. To my knowledge, they do not go to the elementary schools at all unless it's changed in the last few years. But those are all 3 funded by the sheriff's office. I believe the 3rd officer of the schools did have some money in that 3rd officer. They had to buy equipment or something, I can't recall now, but they did have some funds in that 3rd officer.
All right, let's, Brian, do you have anything to comment on the EMS?
I don't, unless there's any questions I can answer.
Do y'all have any questions for Brian at this time? No. And then, Robbie, you have anything on the CPD?
Yeah, I do. I apologize. Mike and I had a meeting back in December scheduled to go over this, and I got sick, and we had never rescheduled it. So if you all remember, last year I requested 2 extra officers besides the SRO and the investigator, and they are not included. I just want to make that clear. We hadn't got a chance to get together on this, so they are not included in this year's budget. I want to see how y'all's feelings are on it. I would like to have them sooner than later, of course, because as I said, the reason I want them, 2 extra people is so we'll have 2 people on, pretty much 24 hours a day. I'm open to, hearing y'all's feelings, how you all feel about it. If we should include it this year, if we want to wait until another year, you want to split it up,
Right now, we have, EMS is 24/7, right? And are you running 2 24/7, 2 ambulances 24/7?
So we're running an ambulance and a half 24/7.
I understand.
From 8A to 8P, we're 2 most days, 2 ambulances. But after the 8 p.m., we drop back to 3 people. So
Still 24/7
24/7.
with backup. So CPD is, how are you scheduled out? You're
Our-
single at night or something? How
Our
do you-
son, well, from 3 o'clock in the morning until 7,
Single.
we just had one officer covering. Yes.
Gotcha.
You know, and on the weekends during the day, you know, most time we have one officer on till either 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. You know, so that's why I said, and the way our schedule is right now, with, you know, we work 8 on and 6 off, so 10 hours a day. So 2 extra people would provide me the coverage where I could shift my supervisors back to cover during the day on the weekends, because I would have that coverage at night on the weekends and through the week. You know, where we would have 2 officers on. The 2 officers that I wanted to hire, they're basically to cover the midnight shifts. That way we'll have 2 people on from 9 o'clock until 7 o'clock in the morning. You know, and then, like I say, I can, excuse me, I can shift the supervisors now to more of a daytime, early evening, you know, because then we will have 4 people on at the busiest time. You know, 3 people on until 3, and then 2 from 3 a.m. until 7 a.m. So,
Yeah, well, I'm open to hear from the committee. That's why I had Mike to bring this up, just because I think everybody needs to see. I mean, that CPD, we're increasing 665 up to 872, which is where it's at. But I mean, you see where we're going with this. You know, if you go with more officers, which may be needed, you know, we're gonna, as those numbers get bigger, then those 2.5% increases each year get bigger. You know what I mean? But then again, we need the safety as well, so it's a tough gamut. I don't know, Denise, you might have a comment where you're on the Public Safety Committee.
I
don't
do.
know.
I think in the climate that we're in, and I'm not talking specifically Shingatay, but the climate that this country is in, there should never be just one officer on duty. We saw what happened up in Delmar last year. You know, Delmar's a small town.
yes,
You know,
they're like us.
We're a small town. But, you know, if you got an officer up the neck, and then something happens down in Ocean Breeze, and you've only got one of them on, you're in a pinch. And this day and time, there should never be just one police officer on this island.
And if I may, another thing too is we're an island to ourselves.
We are.
The sheriff's office will back us up, and I wouldn't be so far as if we needed it. You know, Parksley and Hancock would probably come over here if we actually needed them that bad. However, it's going to take a little while to get somebody here. You know, we're not like the smaller towns as Parksley and Hancock and all. They've got deputies, you know, that are patrolling the county. Yeah, it might take them, 10 or 15 minutes to get somebody to them, but we're different, you know.
Everything up there on that board is everything that is needed to run this town. You know, from the government right on down to escorting, our visitors around on the trolley. Everything up there is needed. And, needs cost money. Now, if Robbie needs it, or whoever the next chief is standing up there needs it, then we need to give it to him. That man right there, sitting there, he's needed it, and is proven time and time again how much we do. I would rather be more covered and not need it than not covered and desperately. That's my thoughts.
You're paying your insurance bill.
Yep.
No, I agree. I mean, you're not, especially with summertime.
Yeah.
You know, you're talking about one end of the island. I mean, you're getting ready to put a massive campground on the south
Yep.
end of the island, and you're getting ready to add more cottages in the middle end. I mean,
Yeah.
you've got more people coming for sure.
Yeah.
What is so Mike, on this, you haven't figured out a way to account for where we have that money set aside in the public safety, and that's not in the budgetary numbers, right?
It is not. We haven't done expenses yet. That's coming up. Payroll was and benefits, other than new positions, obviously, is fairly straightforward. So
But I
not
mean,
gonna-
grabbing the revenue for this, you're not grabbing anything out of the
we have not
public
yet.
safety yet.
No, sir, we have not yet. In fact, we've discussed it briefly in public safety. I may be stepping on Denise here, but we talked about trying to use the money for one-time things rather than a continuous payroll.
Right.
Now, that being said, I also understand that, I was not here, but I also understand that part of the reason that this increase was given to TOT back in the day was so that more resources could be applied to EMS and CPD. My only reservation, I've made this point before, my only reservation here is that I'm somewhat cautious in that I don't want to overextend us. You know, you buy things one time, you have the money for it, you're done. You overextend your payroll, you end up riffing or laying off, and nobody wants to do that. And but I'm still somewhat cautious about the increases that we've been seeing month after month after month, and hopefully if we're not in a bubble, and if we are, it's not too much of a bubble. But at some point, it is certainly appropriate to apply some of that money towards payroll.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, he's talking about getting extra coverage, which will benefit us through the summer, which when the summer money is helping to offset that.
Correct.
You know, I mean, I don't have a problem with adding a position in there and then maybe trying to fund it through, like maybe one position fund through the public safety, money coming through the TOT tax. I don't know what y'all think on that.
I might be jumping the gun here, but, you know, we did some, Mike did it himself, and Tyler and I sat down and did some budget crunching. And from, we did, figured at a starting officer salary, and then we did at a midpoint, one of the midpoint officer salary, starting salary. And now this is including the benefits and everything. Starting officer salary was $57,935.64 with all the benefits and everything. The midpoint is $68,992.34. So $68,992.34. So we took an average of those two, and we came up with, combined for the two officers for the budget year, it would cost excuse me, $126,927.96. That was $63,000 and some change, is the way we were figuring it. Now then, of course, we're going to have probably about a $10,000 extra on top of that for the 1 year for outfitting the two officers.
Per officer.
No, $5,000 per officer, $10,000 total. Yeah, when we did the grant, when Tyler did the grant for the SRO, it was $4,700 and some change, counting the gun, every complete outfit, and everything's going up now. I mean, you know, every time we call, things are getting higher. So we figured 5,000. You know, now was a good estimate for that. So that's about what we're looking at. If it were to be added to the budget, would be around $127,000 for the two officers.
That's and Tyler and Robbie did this for one new officer and one experienced officer. I did it for two experienced officers. It came back to around 140 about it.
Yeah.
So depending on what we get, there's not that much difference, and you don't know what you're going to be able to find when you can start looking for an officer, whether you have somebody experienced that's qualified or desirable, or we have a brand new one. But in any event, certainly we could, funding one of them from that public safety meeting, or public safety funds is not going too far right there. I think we certainly could do that.
No, there's very much money left over.
Yes.
Robbie, have we caught up with the rest of the jurisdictions on pay? 'Cause I know that one time we were like.
The last year helped a lot.
Uh-huh.
We're not up right now with what the sheriff's office is, but we're very little under. I'm thinking, you know, on average, maybe, you know, $1,000 a year or so, $1,500 at most, is what I'm thinking right now. So we were at a big disadvantage,
Yeah, right.
and we closed that gap, you know, last year, thankfully. You know, what was it, October, I think?
It was in October, and we identified the worst of the inequities
Right.
in
Right.
the department and corrected those. And we felt like at the time of discussion with Robbie and Tyler that the others weren't quite such an inequity that it couldn't wait for a little bit.
Yeah, and some of them were even over,
Yeah.
you know, comparable, you know, to years of service is what we were doing.
I'm just wondering if even if we approve this, are we gonna be able to find somebody?
That's a good question.
That's, you know, cause
It's hard right now.
It's hard.
That is, and it's not just, I mean, it's everywhere. Sheriff's office, I was talking with them, you know.
2 officers would give you 24-hour coverage for 2 people, right? I mean,
Yes,
two
yes.
people on a
Now,
coverage.
of course, sick leave, vacation,
Sure.
you know, I mean, they might have a gap here or there where it may be one working by herself, but for the most part, the 2 officers would be able to cover, you
So
know.
if we can get in the 2 officers, we can live without the investigator for a little while longer, see how things go.
Well, the investigator's already in the budget.
Investigator.
That's already
I thought
in.
you said it wasn't.
No, that's already in. The investigator and the SRO are in the budget right now.
Okay. All right, good.
Yeah,
All right.
But
so,
we don't have an investigator.
Right.
not yet. I was getting ready to appoint one, and we had one.
When-
Which was gonna be my next question.
Mhm.
If we had somebody in-house that was,
Yes,
okay.
yes, I do.
When I came on board during the early days of this COVID thing, we pushed a bunch of things aside, and one of the things that got put on the shelf was Robbie's investigator, and he said, you know, even after we said, okay, we've got we think we've got the finances to do it, Robbie wanted to make sure that we actually could use an investigator. There was actually a need before we actually hired him, and that's why it's been so long.
Yeah, when he
Right.
first came up to the podium now, I thought he said 2 officers, an investigator not included, so.
No, the investigator and the SRO are both included in the budget we're under right now, the 22 budget and the 23.
As a matter of
Fiscal
fact, the
year.
SRO and an investigator and a new officer to backfill the SRO's position are in this budget. The only thing that's not in this budget is the 2 new officers Robbie needs to have 24/7 coverage for 2 people.
One more question for you. Where do we stand in the budget with your promotions with them?
Yes, they're in this budget, and I want to get them, you know,
That's
I've
been going on for quite a while.
Yes, it has, you know, and that's something that, you know, I was going to, the next public safety committee meeting we have, you know, was going to suggest we go into a executive session and discuss that, you know, if we could, on personnel issues. But yeah, that's been in the budget now, and, you know, I think it's, you know, it needs to be addressed. I was actually working on the investigator first to try to get that taken care of, and then I was gonna hit the promotions. So
I would like to see this committee forward to council to include his 2 officers in this budget. Whether one of them comes from public safety money, yeah, TOT, or, you know, split up, or both of them included or not included, however it can work out. But I would like to see him have his 2 officers that, not just unique, this town needs it,
yes,
so.
Well, yeah, I guess the procedure would be, we would, you know, agree to everything here except the CPD and send that back to Mike to try to fit in the 2 officers and then figure out where he's gonna pull the money from, or where you recommend pulling the money from on the revenue side.
Right.
If you wanna go in that direction, then he comes back to us with that recommendation. And you can coordinate with Robbie on that deal. So if you all are good with it, you know, we'll propose these changes excluding the CPD, you know, coming back at the next meeting on the CPD, just like we did with the fees last time. You won't make that into a motion.
Make that into a motion just the way Chris said it.
Well, I'll second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank God for
thank you all very much.
All right, moving on. If you remember last time, we had sent the fees back to Mike. He came up, well, I'll let him go. Go, Mike, you're good.
Mark did a lot of work on this, and we put a spreadsheet together. And our cohort group, which we've talked about before 9 other times, and us, we actually took a look at the fees that they pay for building and zoning. Some of them, well, several of them use the county's, their parent county's fees. They don't have their own building department, and some of those use a scheme that's totally different from the way that we do it. They're using a totally different method to charge for building inspections. So we threw those out, and we just used the ones that applied to us, and came up with a spreadsheet here that shows, and I apologize, it's a little blurry, but we put a lot of information and squeeze it down, that's what happens. But suffice it to say that the yellow, the lines here in yellow are the most common or frequently issued permits, and we found that we issued 548 permits in 2021. The yellow lines here represent 25 different permits. Those, of the 548 permits that we issued, 506 of them were these 25 permits. You issue the same ones over and over. I mean, not very many people go around pulling out underground tanks, you know, once a week or things like that. There's a lot of fees on your swimming pools aren't one of the more common ones. So we took the 25 most commonly issued permits and looked at those very hard. What we came up with is that we average, both in our frequently issued permits and our permits overall, we average about 58% of the average of our cohorts. So if our cohorts are charging $100 for a permit, we are charging 58. That's where we are. And that's an average. That's an average. So certainly there's some above that, or maybe a couple below, but that's an average. So not wanting to, and I'm cutting to the chase here a lot because we did a lot of other work on this, but not wanting to take it all back in one bite. Mark and I got together, and what we recommended was that we increase all permit fees across the board by 20%. And that would bump us up significantly. And to give you a little indication, and I haven't done this calculation in a few days, but average, I've consulted some of my building friends, and average basic home now is about $180 a square foot. For a 2,500 square foot house, which is somewhere in the neighborhood, that's $450,000 home. Our fee for that permit is $450. So increasing it by our recommendation is $500. So we're if anybody can't afford that much when they're building a $500,000 home, you know, we feel like it's a very reasonable request, and we need to look at these again in a few years because we don't want to continually go behind. But anyhow, that is our recommendation. We didn't think that the couple builders I talked to said you're so much cheaper than everybody else. We don't care. One of them told me I'm not even going to change my prices on that. That's insignificant. We feel that homeowners it's going to be insignificant for homeowners. Now we'll listen to any and all recommendations from the committee, but that's what we came up with, and we'd like to take a look at these again with the same spreadsheet, same cohorts in a few years to make sure we keep up and even maybe gain a little ground.
We're definitely way behind, except for the conditional use permit. That's kind of, ours are 1,500 and Accomack 780.
There's a reason for that.
There's a reason for that.
Yeah, I can't tell you what that reason is, but
The only thing I came up with, I looked at these extensively, is if you look at, and you can pull that up, Mike, because I don't know if they got it. I would almost like to see, because I agree with the 20%. I think that's great, except on the per square foot on the three of them, which is the top line there, new residential per square foot. The third line, remodeling per square foot, and the fifth line, new construction per square foot, and the commercial new construction and commercial remodeling. I would almost rather see us go with the cohort average on those 4, 5, 6, and then kind of leave this alone for a little while, you know, versus a step in here, step in there. Try to get it where we're cruising for a little while here. I think you could do that with a 20% on all the standard fees and then taking your percentages to the cohort averages. You're still well below the county on all of them, and you're right in line with your cohorts. That was the only recommendation I would have, and then you could leave it alone for a little while.
So that one would be the
Basically,
residential remodeling
your per square footers
per square footers, okay.
on your residential new, residential remodel, commercial new, commercial remodeling. Your per square footage ones, you would go with the cohort average versus the 20%.
And while those aren't the most frequently issued permits, they're certainly the most high dollar permits that we have.
And they're the majority. There are 38 are new construction.
The most common one we have is a re-roof. I think we had 135 or something of the 548 were re-roofs, which is a nominal fee. But we can certainly do that, and I wouldn't feel bad about it at all. That's, again, we're just average here.
Yeah, we're below average still. And these brings us up, I think, to a little more of a, still below the county, but
Cost of doing business.
especially as you remember, we instigated all this because we're looking to buy the program that Mark can use to simplify the whole process. So this might give us the bite that we need to buy the program and experience long-term savings to boot.
By my calculations, just the 20% increase would pay for the program twice. So this gets us a little bit more. Room here. I don't think if the people that I've talked to, I don't think that anyone pays for their building and zoning department through permits and fees. I mean, if you just look at the county and I'm familiar with the process they have and the people they have in place, and I don't see how in the world they collect enough fees. I don't know. I'm just guessing here, but I don't see how in the world they collect enough fees to pay for the department. It's very expensive to run an operation like they run. And I doubt that anyone does, but certainly we want to offset some of those costs.
So would this 20% go into effect July 1?
We would make it go into effect July 1, yes. Great day to start things.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Do you need a motion?
yeah, we'll need a motion on this one, I think, because this is our revisit on this guy,
Right.
so we kind of need to push it forward.
Just say what Chris said.
Well, it's only, there's only 4 that we're gonna go with the
Cohort.
cohort. So I recommend that all fees go up to 20%, not all fees.
The ones in yellow.
Fees identified by.
The fees identified, right, there you go. I'll make a motion that all fees identified by the town manager go up 20%, and the 4 fees that were identified by budget personnel chairman meet our cohort price.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, moving on. Let me see. Yeah, we want to go closed meeting. So I will entertain a motion to go into a closed meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye.